Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, May 7th, 2019. Time for another show. Daily Co's Radio is live now. Bill tells us all the way from Portland, Maine. Here's a good suggestion. Be caller number 20. be a caller at all, really. Be caller number 20, and Kagro X will send you a valuable F Your Subpoena coupon. Expires January 20th, 2021. Maybe. Or it may come back again, which is kind of the problem that we're stuck in now. An endless feedback loop. We'll discuss a little bit about that. Of course, today, lots of action on the subpoena or not to subpoena. I guess you could try and hammer that into shape to make a joke out of it. Question. And what to do with the subpoenas that get crumpled up, thrown out, or possibly torn up, shredded, and eaten, maybe even by the President of the United States. Literally eaten. We've seen him do that before. So, what can I tell you? I don't know I can't predict anything for you. He's eating the papers, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not sure where this one is going to go or what the effect of chewing a subpoena up ever really was supposed to be, what he might think it is. Lots of craziness and, I don't know what else to call it. Just general mayhem, ignorance of everything appears to be the ruling order of the day. Lots to talk about that I've put away in pocket. Lots still developing on Twitter. Lots of calls for movement towards everything from framing action as enforcement of subpoenas to let's just jump straight into impeachment now because it might even increase our ability to enforce those subpoenas, or we need to slow walk it up to where the majority opinion comes along with the idea of the I word, and then just straight outright abandonment of the idea of impeachment. Lots of, I guess, I don't know what to call it, like just sort of strange, weird, allegedly Democratic leaning, or I guess you could say liberal leaning, sophistry about the dangers of impeachment and how Republicans will win if the word is mentioned and how Democrats are somehow doing themselves harm. It's a very weird thing. Armando has plenty to say on it as well. We may as well open the door to him early on and take that on. I feel like it's ground we've been over, of course. So it's difficult to convince myself that more time needs to be spent on it. But I think people, for Armando, he just needs to vent his spleen. And that's actually good for the show, generally speaking, and good for keeping people up to speed on the latest in twists and turns and arguments for and against whatever it is, whatever frightens you today, whether it's impeachment, investigation, subpoenas, what have you. But I did, when I said that I felt like we've been over this ground before, I wasn't kidding. And I know I put this away somewhere, but now I see that it has disappeared from pocket. So we'll see if I can't call it back up again. No, there it is. I was reminded yesterday by something, but then I couldn't find whatever that something was in order to respond to it. But I was reminded of actually the one post that I put up at Daily Kos back in the day, right after my now I guess infamous on the show anyway meeting with President Obama and much of his national security and detainee policy staff. Well, actually not a whole lot of the staff. I think they were along the perimeter of the room listening, but at the table was then Attorney General Eric Holder. Rahm Emanuel was there for some time, but it was actually, focused on, it eventually became clear that it was focused on mollifying critics of detainee policy the previous administrations, that would be the George W. Bush administration's torture policies, indefinite detention. For me, their defiance of all, the likely defiance of all oversight. And that, of course, did come to fruition. But I was just I didn't write very much about that meeting. And I was sort of forced into it by Michael Isikoff, who wrote about it in Newsweek and then went on the Rachel Maddow show to discuss the fact that the meeting had taken place. And I felt somewhat constrained from talking about it. They actually asked not to keep it off the record per se, but that it was, more of an information gathering mission for him. As it turns out, it was more information about, well, where do these people stand and what will it take to make them be quiet, as opposed to what will it take to satisfy them that we're doing the right thing on these policies. But while most of the people there focused their time chiefly on objections to and remedies for the George W. Bush administration's policies, and a few people made explicit calls for at least continued investigation, if not prosecution, of the key figures in the George W. Bush administration who enabled these policies. I spent the bulk of my time on that part and expressing my concern that above and beyond the actual policies to which everybody at the table objected, there was the problem that it was clear to me that it was a matter of ideology for the Republicans, that it was now Republican Party platform, its policy of governance, that the executive branch was untouchable, that whatever it decided would go, and that they were unaccountable to anyone for any policies, particularly, of course, those that they, most easily those that they could wrap in the mantle of national security, but that pretty much anything would go at that point. And I was pretty sure that I had made some mention of that in the post, and I did. And I thought I would bring it up. Just maybe this is a good framing for the day, looking back at where we've been. This was a Thursday. Doesn't matter that it was a Thursday, but that's what it says here in the display. May 21st, 2009. In a post I simply titled, Obama Meets with Civil Liberties Advocates. I was low-keying it. And I'm describing it, and I don't even actually have to describe much of the meeting. I just basically said Michael Isikoff largely got it right. I don't know that I would have described all of the meeting the same way, but it was largely accurate. It's down at the bottom, the second to last paragraph, where I really found what I was looking for, just the part that I remembered discussing. The last part, entirety of the last paragraph begins this way. So my sense of it is, that is, what we did in that meeting, is that very little is likely to change from where we are now in terms of policy with respect to what the administration has inherited, but that the intention is to build a coherent legal framework for dealing with similar issues going forward, since there almost certainly will be new and more detainees in this ongoing fight, where the previous administration acted by executive fiat. That is good news by itself, but there's still much work to be done on these and other related issues, and a lot of areas of disagreement that require a fuller airing. I'm still concerned, for instance, that the Republican theory of executive power with respect to detainee policy, something the President, Obama that is, referred to as anything goes in his speech today. That is a speech that on the policy, detainee policy in particular, that followed this meeting. I'm still concerned that the Republican theory of executive power with respect to detainee policy, referred to as anything goes, is in fact the Republican theory of executive governance in general. That poses an extraordinarily broad array of difficulties, not the least of which is that it's an open and ongoing threat to the greater Obama agenda, which is itself often invoked as a reason for not dabbling in the, quote, distraction of, quote, looking backward. But unless we can demarcate what I then referred to as Cheneyism, and really was Nixonism and now Trumpism, the anything goes philosophy, as explicitly illegal, unconstitutional, and illegitimate, unless we can actually do that and declare it as such, its continued existence and threatened practice by future administrations, hello, the very next one, calls into question the value and durability of whatever parts of the Obama agenda are ultimately implemented on detainee policy or anything else. That's a huge problem, though it clearly was beyond the intended scope of this meeting. But I'm hopeful that there will be more opportunities to discuss this broader context in the future. How stupid was that to say? Because now here we are with more opportunities to discuss this broader context in the future. It's like the fake Chinese proverb, I think fake. Did we ever do? We did decide that it was fake, didn't we? May you live in interesting times. Well, here we are in interesting times once again. And, well, pretty much exactly where I thought we'd land in May of 2009 at the table seated next to Eric Holder and across from Barack Obama, and just kind of letting them know then and there, you have no idea who succeeds you. You have no idea what comes next in Republican administrations. Really, you have no idea what comes next in a Democratic administration. Maybe you have some thoughts about who that might be. But, and I'm sure you have guesses as to who might be the next Republican president. At the time, I don't think any of us would have guessed that it would be Donald Trump, but it is. And the warning was supposed to be, look, you could get someone, you don't have to get anyone crazy or obviously crazy in order for this to happen again. Lots of us thought, of course, that George W. Bush was stupid, and he was, or that Dick Cheney was crazy, and he was. That's all true. But none of us, I don't think, in 2009 predicted Donald Trump and what he would do with it. But it was pretty obvious that failing to take on how the previous administration had achieved its results, much less, well, I guess I should have said, failing to take on the results, what they did, much less how they did what they did, was going to put us in tremendous danger. And of course, well, we have to be able to give people health care. And that's true. And then they did give a lot of people more access to health care. You can critique it all you want, and there's plenty of room to do that. And you're absolutely right. And it could have been better. Or not, but the point really was that it can all be dismantled relatively easily if you have a Republican administration that, as a matter of policy, believes that it cannot be restrained by the law. Now, luckily, we haven't run into one yet, even in the Trump administration, that thinks across the board in this way. They have, for whatever reason, decided to remain constrained by the rule of law for the most part. With respect to, say, the health care bill, they've tried mightily to destroy it, but where they've been turned back by the courts, they've largely complied with the court's orders. But in areas of what used to be called national security, now no longer deserves the term, they've ignored it across the board. They're just simply uninterested in it. And probably in a few other areas as well, though they would surely try and pull the issue of immigration in under a national security umbrella and call it that and justify it in the same way. But in ever expanding areas of policy, they just have become executive supremists, and it's just always been, I mean, you couldn't have stated it more broadly than Nixon did, though he wasn't president when he said it, or at least when we heard him say it on television, that when the president does it, that means it's not illegal. But, you know, I don't know. I can't understand how anybody thought we weren't there with George W. Bush. And I am a little tired of watching people come to the realization that we are, or may be, in their opinion, if they're slow movers, there with Donald Trump, when we were so clearly there with George W. Bush. And it's a little annoying to watch people who, you know, turned their nose up at the issue then now say, aha, I want to be a leading advocate for how brightly our hair on fire ought to be burning at this juncture, but I couldn't be bothered with it then. I thought it was a bad idea then, and it was going to reflect poorly on Democrats, and it was risky. And of course, now we're finding, of course, the same excuses being offered, well, by the same actors, largely, as because, of course, there hasn't been much change in the leadership in the Democratic House. And of course, at the time when the question was who should lead the House in the legislative context, who's the best at shepherding symbolic legislation through the House only to see it die in the Senate? Well, Nancy Pelosi's probably the best at that. Who's the best in strategizing against expansive and overwhelmingly stupid executive power? I don't know. Might not be her, but I don't actually have any other candidates who are viable. And maybe, I'm leaning on the crutch of electability there. Certainly there are other members of the Democratic caucus in the House who saw the danger differently. But I don't know what their organizational skills were with respect to getting the rest of the caucus to go along. But my one reservation about the current leadership team was that they were not particularly good at dealing with this very obvious threat, even though they would be, digging back into the batter's box with one strike on the count. And having seen the same pitch before, you have a certain amount of confidence in a major league ball player that even down 0-2, they can, if they're told the same pitch is coming, and why wouldn't it be at 0-2, can still manage to get a piece of the ball. But it doesn't appear to be the case. All right. Maybe now would be a good time to say, to take a look at least at what it is that Armando is. What are you all hepped up about, Armando? He's got a spleen full of bile, he said. So if I want to talk impeachment inquiry, more than game, we can do that. Pick a time. It can be now. It can be later. You let me know. I think we need to ask why people are denying the obvious. That seems like a good question. And he includes for me let's open it up. Here we are. And then let's open up the Skype. How come there's so much, there seems like a lot of echoing going on in Skype. Anyway, here comes Armando. How you doing?
Am I echoing?
Yeah, you're not. It was the ringy-dingy sound of
one
that comes along. Yeah, right. and no matter what I do with the volume of all the other computers, it likes to play out loud on all of them. That may be one of the new improvements on the new updated Skype is it doesn't allow you to turn down the volume on the ringer. That's okay. We can live with that one. So what have you sent me here? Michael Conway?
I sent an article, which I think is very valuable for just closing the case on whether an impeachment inquiry is necessary to truly investigate Trump.
I see. Okay.
If you have a chance, I hope you can read it. It is from the Counsel for the House Judiciary Committee in 1974.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that they agreed at the time that many of the subpoenas they were issuing would not have been enforceable outside of an impeachment inquiry.
Okay.
So it's not, as you said, we've covered this ground. There's not an honest person who thinks that an impeachment inquiry is what is, if you're really going to investigate, that's what you have to do. Mm-hmm. It's really not arguable.
Yeah.
And, Jonathan Bernstein and Jonathan Chait and all the Jonathans.
That's happening today. The Jonathans are going crazy.
The people who Democrats shouldn't oppose the Iraq War and shouldn't oppose torture, shouldn't oppose, incredibly also don't want Democrats to open an impeachment inquiry.
And ironically, no, it's not ironic at all, obviously, but like you said, they too are executive extremists and executive supremacists, and it's largely because maybe it's because they're journalists.
They say they aren't, but they are because they say, "Oh, we can't do that. How's that going to look?"
Right.
Well, this
If you're an
How it's gonna
optics
look.
person,
It's gonna
you're
make it.
yeah. There's hard executive supremacists, I guess, who are explicit about it, and there's a soft executive supremacy, I guess, theory, which disguises itself as horse race politics and optics focus. How's it going to look? Well, they only focus on one office. That's when you're talking about looks. Yeah.
Right. So the whole idea is let's make sure we can stay in office so we can continue to do nothing.
Yes, but complain.
Therefore,
loudly.
we do nothing so we can
Which I
win
do.
again, so we can continue to do nothing. Because, of course, the next time there'll be some other thing you can't do anything about.
Right. But then we'll be here to tell you that you can't, just as you couldn't last time. We're the experts.
Right. Exactly. So, okay. So the argument is, well, the end game is a failed vote in the Senate. No, and I say, well, wait a second. Why is that the end game?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we even talking about end game? So why don't we start with what you say we want to do? These are your words. Don't do that. Let's just investigate him through the normal channels. And as you know, Trump is defying every single request. From what I understand, the administration has not turned over a single document to the House this year, unless you call the Mueller report turning it over. And, of course, that's redacted, and there's a big fight about the redactions. One of the fights about the redactions, David, as you know, we've gone over this, is the so-called Rule 6E material that was presented to the grand jury. And the Circuit Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, which has jurisdiction over these fights, recently came down on a case called McKevney that a district court judge doesn't have the discretion to bypass that rule, absent what? Absent an impeachment inquiry.
Yes, that's the claim.
Well, that's what the case said.
Yes.
Until it's overturned, that's the law in the jurisdiction where Congress sits.
Right. If you're one of those, like I like the law people.
If you like the law. People. Okay, so what do you do?
Yes.
So I think it's easy enough to say, listen, we really don't want to do an impeachment inquiry. We don't even want to impeach you, but to do our job of oversight, we have to open an impeachment inquiry because of this case and because you're not cooperating with our normal inquiries. We have no choice. How hard is it to say that? If you want to just pretend, I really, really, really don't want to do that. But the court came down with this decision, and the president's not cooperating. Yeah. So I really have no choice. We're not really going to vote out articles of impeachment, most likely, unless we really find something and we sway the American public. But just to do our jobs, we're going to have to open the inquiry. It's just, reluctantly, we hate doing it.
If you feel like saying it, yeah.
You know us, we never stand up for anything. We're a bunch of limp fish. But, they gave us no choice.
Right. And since we're
so you can really do all that and say, listen, I'm a complete wimp. I don't want to do this.
Yeah. By the way, I'll suggest for them, I'm such a wimp that I won't even impeach the president to do it. This is actually an impeachment proceeding against William Barr. Because I don't dare impeach the president.
Even better. All right, dude. That actually doesn't work, in my opinion, because it still has to be relevant to the inquiry of him. I think you're impeaching Barr because he didn't do something. So you talk about what he didn't do.
Well, impeach Barr
he
because
doesn't get removed either. So I'm not sure the theory of impeaching Barr makes any sense.
Oh, well, I would just say I'm impeaching Barr because I think he's in dereliction of his duty, specifically with respect to how he treated 6E material.
Okay.
So I need all the 6E material to tell whether he's really impeachable.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And that's fine. Whatever works for making them feel good.
But right. You don't want to do it on Pence.
So what? So
Kavanaugh.
Here's where we get back to it, because there's no principled argument for not opening an impeachment inquiry, right? There's no principled argument.
I don't think
Everyone, even the people who oppose impeachment, say, of course she should be impeached, but don't impeach.
Yes.
Right? Nobody says he shouldn't be impeached. That it's a win.
Only Republicans.
Only Trump says it.
Right.
Yeah, I'm talking about the people who are on our side who are arguing against this.
Right.
They say, of course he should be impeached, but we shouldn't do it anyway. Because why? It's bad politics, they say. Right?
Yes.
All right. First of all, I don't know why you think it's bad politics. You say, well, look at all the people that oppose impeachment. So, you're not going to impeach him right away. You're just opening an impeachment inquiry. How about this? We all agree that for now, we don't vote articles of impeachment, but we open an impeachment inquiry because that's what we have to do to start the process of actually oversight, right? The thing that you say we should be doing. Expose Trump through investigations. Well, he's not cooperating with any investigations, so you're exposing nothing. So that your theory of it, that part of it doesn't work. So you say, okay, well, you're right. Forget about the investigations. We'll go beat him in 2020. But you just basically normalized everything he's done. So, well, how bad could it have been? Nobody even opened an impeachment inquiry.
Yeah.
No one's actually shown me anything. Well, I couldn't see anything because Trump didn't. Well, you didn't do anything about it, though, did you? So it must have been normal. And the economy's boring. Sure. There's 3.5% unemployment. I'm not sure what you guys are complaining about. You basically agree that it's not abnormal or wrong what he's doing. You didn't even investigate it. So what are you talking about? Yeah. So I don't understand I don't even understand the crass, unprincipled political argument anymore.
No, it doesn't make a great deal of sense. And I guess they just think we'll beat him at the ballot box because other reasons. People don't
what other reasons?
Immigration policy. Bad? I know. The economy's not bad. You're in trouble on that one.
Okay.
But just general Trump hatred.
Look at unemployment. It's it's at a 50-year low. So, okay,
we got to go. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We were so rudely interrupted for not even a real commercial. Outrageous that we had to do this, and we should have suspended commercials for the day. But it gave us a chance to sort of refocus a little bit to come back to the topic we were on. It's a tough spot for Democrats who, particularly, if you approach this as a electoral politics Democrat only. It only matters how many seats we occupy, not what we do with them. Even then, I'm not certain that voters come to believe that Democrats deserve to occupy more seats if they don't have any interest in using them to, say, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, as they're supposed to. But, it's possible that they may rediscover their principled beliefs about the Republic. If there were 67 Democratic senators and you thought you could reasonably impeach the guy, then we would be for that. But how do you then tell people that's the party you ought to go and vote for and send more of them to Congress because something? Because everything short of actually taking care of the Republic, we might be able to do. We may be able to raise the amount of tax deduction you're allowed for putting solar panels on your roof. Well, all right. That's a thing. I wasn't thinking of trading that for democracy, but maybe, democracy limps along for 8 years because I put a Democrat in the White House. which is what happened the last time, and which is what what the crux of the argument at the White House was you're arguing for Democrats as a party standing for the proposition that every so often we'll have a constitutional republic. And then when we lose, we won't. But don't worry, it's just for a brief period of time. Everything will come roaring back when you elect the next Democrat because reasons, and ignoring the fact that, well, the body that purports to say what the law is will be almost entirely Republican, and crazy ass Republican at that. And you're going to have to you're going to have to say something about that at some point. Just sort of plodding along, hopping from island of democracy to island of democracy in a sea of authoritarianism. Eventually the sea level's going to rise, as we all know, in other areas of our discussion, and overwhelm us. And then what will you do? And we will reminisce about how fantastic those times were, I guess. So it's not a great, rallying point for Democrats. How do you win at the polls when the message is, we're not that good after the polls? I don't know.
I don't understand it, David. I don't think there's any logic to their position anymore at all, because the argument they made was just do regular oversight. It'll bring out all the same material, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, let's say we don't vote articles of impeachment, and that's off the table. Okay, because it's bad politics, because the Senate's never going to do anything. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, I don't believe any of that, but suppose I did.
Yeah.
What you're saying is, you said, let's just do our normal oversight.
All right.
But Trump has just shown you you're not
going
to be able to do
right.
that.
Yeah, and Bush
said,
told you the same thing.
You're going to do your normal oversight? Screw you! I'm not doing it. Then what? Then what?
Then nothing.
And that's why, if you get a chance, you might want to read that article to your audience, because I think it really frames it in the context of what Nixon did. Mm-hmm. Remember, one of the articles of impeachment that was
big topic of discussion now. Yeah,
or it was voted out by committee. It didn't actually go to the full House. Remember, Nixon, I don't believe, was actually impeached.
No, he was not.
There was articles of impeachment were voted out by committee, the Judiciary Committee.
Right. Peter
Rodino, chairman. And Article 3 of the articles of impeachment said he defied congressional subpoenas.
Right. That is true. People are making a big deal out of it now, as it should be. I will point out that most administrations since then similarly defied congressional subpoenas at some point, some of which situations worked themselves out eventually, others of which ran out the clock and were mooted, waiting for a decision in court. And
right.
But
what was established in that era through the different cases that percolated is that impeachment in the general tug of war between the executive branch and Congress, which shouldn't be, and we can argue about that, but it's always been there. The courts have been reluctant to get in the middle of those fights, right?
Yes.
Political question, yada, yada, whatever. They have a big exception. And again, if you read the article I sent you, you'll see
I guess
how
I should just do that.
Very well framed in context of history, in the context of Richard Nixon. Okay, well, you know what trumps all that? And the courts agree? When it's an impeachment inquiry. When it's an impeachment inquiry, there's no issue of legitimate legislative purpose, which is bogus anyway. The legislature decides what's legitimate. The courts have to defer to that, basically. Number two, it defeats the Rule 6E issues.
Yeah.
And number three, which is a big one, it defeats executive privilege.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Everything you're hearing about, any little argument that's out there, is defeated when you open an impeachment inquiry. In terms of its investigative power, to use the phrasing of the Steele seizure cases, the congressional investigatory power is at its zenith in an impeachment inquiry. Okay. It's almost undefeatable.
Yeah, it should be. Of course, there's always the possibility of just saying, no, it isn't.
That's the Justice Department's position, by the way.
Yeah.
That is the Justice Department's position now. The OLC opinion that they are relying on to not cooperate with stuff said, well, of course, if you called it an impeachment inquiry, all these arguments wouldn't hold. They said that.
They must really want that, I guess.
I think that this is, the last, fig leaf of respectability. That probably change it if you do call it an impeachment. Oh, no, it's an illegitimate impeachment inquiry.
Yeah.
Which, again, I don't even know how Alan Dershowitz could defend that argument because it's not illegitimate. It's in the Constitution.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how they just would.
The courts don't get to pass on the legitimacy of the House's impeachment or the Senate's removal of an officer of the government. They don't. They have no jurisdiction over that. So they can't say it's illegitimate. They have no ability to do that. And let's put it this way. If they say they do, then we're done. It's a banana republic. And whatever.
Well, at least you'll know what you're dealing with.
Not that we're not already there, but this is as clear as anything gets. At least let's test it. Let's find out. Is it, absolutely, openly a banana republic? Let's find out.
Well, that's the concern that the other side has got. That which of the Jonathans was it? Jonathan Bernstein basically is laying out the argument that, well, if you test it, you might lose. And if you lose, you find out you're a banana republic. And there's some hope that you're not a banana republic as long as you don't open the box.
No,
right?
That's obviously stupid. Because if I'm afraid to open the box, then I'm already there.
Yes. Smaller version of the same argument that was made, for instance, about filibuster reform. Well, if you press the issue now, or if you press the issue on judges back in 2005 or whatever, unless Democrats agree to stop filibustering Republican judicial nominees, they'll use the nuclear option, and then the filibuster will be gone, and you won't be able to block anybody. So in order to preserve the filibuster, you have to agree not to use it. Same thing. Don't open the box. If you don't open the box, you don't know if there's no such thing as a filibuster anymore. And as long as you don't know, they don't know, but they do know. And everything will be fine. Everything will remain the same. But why would you want everything to remain the same? It's terrible right now. I don't know. The answer is people
There's no
like
argument
things.
that makes sense from where they're saying. Again, their fig leaf at the time, those anti-impeachment inquiry people, was just do normal oversight. Mm-hmm. Everything will be exposed, and then maybe things will come out. Well, Trump said, "Oh yeah, no, you're not."
Yeah,
and their answer is, "Well, I guess that's that. Nothing we can do because if we open the box."
Yeah, I guess I don't know why that's their answer either. A lot of them who answer that they were there when we did this in the George W. Bush administration. The last couple articles that I've bothered to dig out from my archives is that series of articles that say you're not getting the oversight that you were promised. And by which I mean I was referring to Nancy Pelosi's 2006 campaign promise of, the reason you want to install a Democratic majority is oversight. You're going to get subpoena power and oversight were the watchwords. And I mean,
check
I hate
on Trump.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about 2006, a check on Bush. Subpoena power and oversight were the watchwords of the 2006 election. They won the majority, and then George W. Bush stopped sending people to testify. Cabinet secretaries refused to show up. Bureau of Mine Safety people in the Sago mining disaster inquiry just said, we're not coming. We're not answering your questions. We don't like them. We're leaving. They walked out. No one remembers that because who cares? Miners. We don't give a crap about that. Then, of course, coal miners became all-stars in the Trump campaign, and we still don't care about them. But all right. They just ran the same election, 2018. Subpoena power, oversight. All right, here you go. We're not going to do it. Or we're not going to be able to do it. We're going to try like hell. We're going to put little chickens in William Barr's seat, but he's still not coming.
Chickens.
It was funny and all. And the guy ate fried chicken out of the KFC bucket, but the attorney general didn't show up. And you still think you can't do anything about it. So I don't know what to tell you. But again, you watched it happen. You remember it happened in 2006. You just hope nobody else remembers that it happened. Just as we had a previous example, we know what happens when you say, yeah, we got you, but even when you just say, let's do inquiries, congressional inquiries, but don't use the impeachment word. We're just going to let it all come out through normal oversight. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. I guess there's too many variables, and maybe you could blame it on the teaching or blame it on the tests that today's teachers have to teach to. But ask kids who are taking history, AP US government, AP US history, whatever, now about Watergate. Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. Watergate. I know all about it. They almost impeached Nixon. But they didn't impeach him, actually. But they were going to. It was so certain that he resigned. Okay. Tell me about Iran-Contra. Who? What now? Tell me about the one where we said, let's just let it all come out through normal oversight and it'll work, because it did in Watergate too. I don't know about that one. Which one was that? What president even did it involve? And unless you were actually, politically conscious at the time, you probably have no memory of it at all. It's not something that you get as a key point in a history review or a U.S. government review. It doesn't happen. And by the way, literally, physically, what happened to the record that got developed in Iran-Contra? It was boxed up and stored in the attic in one of the congressional office buildings, rediscovered 10 years later by accident when somebody who had been actively, maybe when John Kerry actually moved out of his office. It turned out that it was in offices that his committee controlled, stored away somewhere. But somebody left office and they were cleaning out the attic. And they're, oh, look at this. It was all the record we developed for Iran-Contra. It was supposed to be like major historical record that everyone was going to remember, because we were going to develop that record and everyone would see that, but you can stop short of impeachment because Reagan, too popular, yada, yada, whatever, bad politics for us. Well, that's what happens to it. Scrap heap. No one knows it. The major perpetrators not only came back to serve Bush's son, who later became president, which is amazing enough, but we'll develop the record and these people will be poisoned forever unless their namesake runs for president and you get confused. I don't even remember which George Bush this is, but let's elect him twice. Once anyway. Put him in office twice. Let him bring back Elliot Richardson. Let him bring him back, or Abramson. Let him bring back all the recidivists. Let's make, as a matter of fact, let's make Oliver North president of the NRA. What the hell? Go for it. He's not. I don't remember much about Oliver North, but I think what we remember about him was he was extraordinarily trustworthy around networks of dirty money and guns. I think that's what we learned about it. Let's put him at the top of it. It's not elective office, public office, but the guy became a celebrity. Although I guess it shouldn't have surprised us. G. Gordon Liddy had a radio show during the whole thing, and everybody thought he was a genius on the Rush Limbaugh side of the spectrum. Is he still alive? I don't know. Anyway, we haven't done a very good job with just mere oversight. Not only because we can't conduct it, but because even when you do conduct it and you don't say what it's for, people tune out. Just do it do it as routine oversight. Tell me who gives a crap about routine oversight. Not even the people being overseen.
a routine oversight doesn't get on TV the whole time. This is the Iraq-Contra, for better or worse, were televised.
Yes, to some extent, that's true.
Look, I mean, I know everyone loves him, but George Mitchell was terrible. And Warren Rudman was a blowhard, and the entire hearings were horrible, in my opinion. But they were what they were.
Yes.
And at least they did that. And you know why they were able to do that? Because I know what you're saying about Iran-Contra is true, but in terms of the investigation of Iran-Contra, the Reagan administration cooperated.
Yeah, I guess to a large extent.
The witnesses.
No, but
they didn't withhold the documents. Donald Trump's administration is saying you get no witnesses, you get no documents. I'm not cooperating at all. I'm not even faking cooperating. I'm telling everybody in the world I will never cooperate.
That's simply the more obvious of the plays. And I mean, I guess they thought they were being savvy in Reagan-Bush days by saying, well, why don't we cooperate and then pardon everybody? All right. We could do that.
Right. And, of course, we had an independent counsel statute.
Yeah. And that made a big difference.
Had some impact.
Yes.
And again, I understand your point that, well, what was the end result? No one did anything about Reagan, and he's still, they want to put him on Mount Rushmore still. Mm-hmm. So even though he should have been impeached and removed from office for a number of reasons, I also think that one of the things that happened with Reagan is everybody knew he was senile by then. Maybe he didn't know what he was doing, but
we have that problem
think
now.
He did know what he was doing, and he would have done it anyway. He was crazy when it came to communism. So, and Oliver North was Oliver North, and he loved Oliver North for whatever reason. But again, I see your point, but at least there was an investigation. At least there was things being done.
Yes.
Now we're being told routine oversight. And the Trump administration says, oh, routine oversight, screw you. No oversight.
Yeah.
And then what's the answer to the people who oppose an impeachment inquiry? What's their answer now? What's Richard Neal going to do now? Just to take the most basic and fairly easy case. We knew Mnuchin wasn't going to give tax returns. We knew it at the first minute.
He said so.
And that's why Neal should have asked for it on January 20th or whatever date.
Mm-hmm.
And they could have done this song and dance and said, look, you got 30 days. And it's like, you said, oh, DOJ says. Well, but I'm not going to give you the opinion yet because they're still working on it. Well, it's like, okay, that pretty much gives up the game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the word shall means shall, and I don't know that there's anything to argue about here. The executive branch doesn't get to determine what's a legitimate legislative purpose. And the courts have said, at least in most contexts, that we really don't look into it, whether it's actually legitimate. They say it's legitimate, and we have to take them at their word. So in theory, okay, this is the one you say, okay, I don't need an impeachment inquiry for this. This is a nice, simple case. Shall means shall. It's nothing much to talk about. And Mnuchin says, oh, there's no legitimate legislative purpose. Well, you know what? Nobody cares what you think. And Mnuchin says, well, I could have given you other stuff that is about your supposed legitimate legislative purposes. Well, you know what, Mnuchin? You don't get to tell me what you're going to give me. I tell you what I want. And one of the things I want is based on this 1924 law that says you have to give me whoever's tax returns I ask for. It's not optional. You don't get to think about it. You give it to me. And you know what? You've done it in the past. You know the story, right? Grassley asked for Acorn's tax returns.
Well, I guess he did. He probably did.
And the Obama administration said, well, let me look at the law. It says he gets to get them. Here you go.
Oh, well.
And nothing came of it because there was actually nothing there, but they destroyed Acorn anyway.
Yeah.
As you know.
We helped.
And off it went. My point is, this is not controversial or hasn't been. So what is Richard Neal waiting for? What has he been waiting for? He doesn't even want to do this. Richard Neal does not want to do this.
Certainly didn't appear as much. I don't know. What did he do anything yesterday? Yesterday, once he found out that it,
he said he has to consult with his counsel to see what he's going to do.
Which means, okay, so they'll sue.
So maybe in a month they'll send another letter, laying out their legal position. And if you don't produce now,
right,
I'm really, really, really going to send another letter.
Yeah.
And let me just say this, because it's fun to poke at Richard Neal, and it's fun to poke at Jerry Nadler, and it's fun to poke at Elijah Cummings, as I do.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one person behind all this. And everyone's getting pissed at me because I say it now pretty openly. This is Nancy Pelosi's show. And what's happening is what she wants to happen. She's the Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
You don't think they could say to her, okay, Neil, time to do this?
Yeah, that's what you would imagine would happen. She's, all I can tell you is she's great at organizing a normal house.
Make your larger point is what she did in 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
That you were talking about.
That was
Who was the Speaker of the House then? It was Nancy Pelosi.
Yes. And I will. The only thing I want to add to all of that is then people say, see, when I said we should replace her, you said, well, what was your alternative? I mean, do you think Seth Moulton would be bringing the hammer down?
No, he would not.
He'd be worse.
He'd be worse.
Well, what about Barbara Lee? Well, you know what? She wasn't a real candidate. She didn't stand for it.
She couldn't win. At the end of the day, it's who am I for doesn't matter as much as who are they for. You know, we're not even arguing about an election. It's an election in the House of Representatives. And, you know, the alternative, Tim Ryan, that would have been worse. You're absolutely right. And on this, they certainly wouldn't have been any better. I think we can pressure Nancy Pelosi if people will stop thinking that you can't criticize Nancy Pelosi. She'll listen. If you get enough people to say this is unacceptable.
Yeah, I mean, I think she would be pretty responsive to that. I mean, what you indirectly might work as well. You know, you can certainly pressure her directly, but you could also be talking to your Democratic member of Congress and say you're the constituency she listens to. Yeah.
You just see Lloyd Doggett basically
I did, but I didn't see exactly what he was calling for.
He says, listen, if all we're showing people is Trump and trans, Republican obeisance to Trump and Democratic timidity, what reason are we giving voters to vote?
All right.
And he's right.
Yes, I think we were just saying that.
And he's right. This timid strategy is what discourages people from voting. When they say both sides are the same, all right, well, maybe that's not true, and it isn't. But you know what else is true? It doesn't much matter on this issue who holds the House of Representatives, it turns out. The Republicans wouldn't investigate at all. I get that, and they wouldn't be sending out tweets and whatnot. But at the end result is the same as if whoever is it, what's his name, McCarthy was Speaker. What's the result that's different?
Yeah.
So people say, well, why am I bothering to vote? And I go, humana. I can't say on this point.
Yeah.
What does it matter if you vote or not?
It makes it difficult to there's plenty of other reasons, but on this
I know there's
question,
things as HR1,
yeah, sure.
And he stopped this, and there's things, and of course that's all true, and of course you still should vote, of course all those things. I'm talking about the optics, to use their word. The optics are it doesn't matter that she's Speaker of the House. That's the optics right now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, unfortunately, that's true. And, did I defend her in the race to head the caucus? Yes. There's several things that the head of the caucus has to take care of. And one of them is defending congressional prerogatives, against, aggressive executive supremacists. She's not really that good at that. The other one is doing everything else that you normally have to do.
And
that she's very good at.
And she did great on the shutdown, and there's important things that she's doing. I do not want her replaced. There's nobody that's going to do the job better. That doesn't mean she's doing it right on this issue.
Yeah, we just want her to hear from more Lloyd Doggetts and to believe that they now represent the majority opinion in the caucus.
Or at least to fear the optics and the politics of it, because apparently the argument is the politics is bad. Well, we have to make the politics bad for not opening an impeachment inquiry.
Yes. Yeah, and there are a number of ways to do it, and perhaps it's less effective. I would argue that to say, well, then we're not going to show up. Well, that doesn't help you at all, as opposed to, let me tell you what we're looking for in a candidate. And honestly, there couldn't be a better opportunity to demonstrate that than in a presidential election year, when you can directly pressure the still relatively small campaign operations of 20 plus Democratic presidential candidates to get one of them to take up your cause. And we did do that in 2008. And we had Chris Dodd's campaign was almost exclusively based on, one, his having staffed up with Netroots connected people, and two, they're listening to those of us who said this is, it's insane for us to campaign on Don't Look Backward, even though that was what eventually won. You don't always win your case, but I mean, there was no other reason. There's no real reason why Chris Dodd's campaign should have been out there up front on holding the George W. Bush administration accountable. That should not ordinarily have been Chris Dodd's top
never been his lane,
issue.
And now his lane is where he is now.
Yeah.
He's a well-paid lobbyist.
Yes.
But Chris Dodd
Right.
saw a political advantage.
In 2008, right. Grassroots organizing and the fact that in order to break out as a candidate, he had to have an ear to the ground and find out, where are the fracture points? What can we exploit? It's that dirty. It's that, it's not high-minded necessarily. Could be, but you have that opportunity, and it's a unique one that you have now. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think maybe at this juncture the thing to do is actually to sit and read through the more coherent thoughts of Michael Conway, as you suggested, Armando, and even if that doesn't close out discussion on the subject, it prevents us from spending another hour saying, "Damn it, this sucks." And here's another reason why, and it's actually the same reason. Anyway, Michael Conway puts it this way. This is his headline here. If William Barr continues to defy subpoenas, and really any of them continue to defy subpoenas, Watergate offers House Democrats several options. What are we reading here? It's NBC News. I don't recognize the layout here, but very interesting look.
They have these little opinion pieces that they publish. Some are good and some are bad.
Yeah, all right. So
both sides.
Subheader here. In this fight, not acting to preserve its powers as a co-equal branch of government could relegate Congress to subservience in perpetuity. That's right. There's also an entire article that makes the argument, but that's the right conclusion. Michael Conway, former counsel for the U.S. House Judiciary Committee, so used to be in a position where he could have a tremendous amount of influence in convincing them what to do. The House Judiciary Committee grappled 45 years ago with the same thorny issue that it faces this week: how to respond to an executive branch defiantly refusing to comply with congressional subpoenas. That committee is currently dealing with the Trump administration's refusal to comply with its subpoena for the unredacted report and supporting documents of Special Counsel Robert Mueller, and contemplating issuing one to compel the testimony of Attorney General William Barr, who refused an invitation to testify on Thursday last, I suppose. The Watergate congressional investigators, however, had a card that the current Congress lacks, as the 1974 committee's subpoena for President Richard Nixon's tapes was part of an impeachment inquiry of the president. They hadn't voted for impeachment yet. They were just asking questions, but they were admitting that they were about impeachment. Because the current Congress has not authorized an impeachment inquiry, the ability of the House to enforce its subpoenas or to punish Barr is sharply circumscribed. And I think you were saying, I'm not positive I buy that as a legal theory. I think that they probably should be able to enforce them under any circumstances. But if there are people, so long as there are people who believe that it can only be done during in an impeachment context, fine. Here's the label.
The context of that statement is and you'll see the idea that the courts don't like deciding.
I could see that.
Executive branch, House, and congressional branch, legislative branch disputes.
Yes. All right.
Except, and you'll continue because he wrote this in 1974. It's actually pretty interesting.
All right.
The report that he's going to cite. Go ahead.
Okay. History affords Congress maximum power only when it is investigating a possible impeachment. The 1974 staff report bluntly stated, the Supreme Court has contrasted the broad scope of the inquiry power of the House in impeachment proceedings with its more confined scope in legislative investigations. I see. Embracing its unique constitutional role to check an out-of-control executive branch by using its impeachment power against either President Donald Trump, Barr, or both, good, will be the sole way to guarantee that Congress can enforce its subpoenas. Only by instituting an impeachment proceeding will Congress be equipped to act on the evidence that Mueller intended to convey to it. And by not acting, a dangerous precedent will be set, relegating Congress to subservience to the president as a forever unequal branch of government. Madison would have assumed that, of course, Nancy Pelosi and others would have defended their prerogatives as a co-equal branch. It's beyond question. It is not. But, okay.
Yeah, the founders weren't as smart as everybody thinks.
Okay. Or rather, the founders would say, no, Americans of the future aren't as smart as we thought they were. We were right. You're dumb. The House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and today's congressional leaders can find guidance from the actions of Congress during Watergate. On April 11th, 1974, following the February vote by the full House to authorize an impeachment inquiry, the Judiciary Committee issued a subpoena seeking White House tapes, transcripts, notes, and memoranda relating to 147 conversations, in which investigators believed that the president and his aides discussed, among other things, the Watergate burglary and its cover-up. Nixon, of course, refused. In a report that same day, committee lawyers identified 3 potential remedies if Nixon did not comply with the committee's subpoena, while explaining that, quote, each of these methods presents problems, unquote. First, Congress, and again we quote, has the power to hold in contempt a person who has disobeyed its subpoena, unquote, or to a lesser degree, the House can reprimand or censure the recalcitrant witness. A contempt finding, however, requires an affirmative vote of the entire House. That's okay. If the subpoenaed party today, Barr, does not produce the requested documents or justify to Congress grounds for nondisclosure, the House could find him in contempt and order him arrested for the duration of the current term of Congress ending in January 2021, or until the party, Barr here, complies with the subpoena. The last time Congress did that, however, was 1935. By the way, what happens if you hold Barr in inherent contempt, put him in jail, and he resigns as Attorney General, and the new Attorney General likewise refuses to comply? I mean, you would want to jail that guy, but what do you do with Barr? I'm just curious. No, I don't think anybody has ever thought that. I
don't know. I guess you have to let him out at that point.
Yeah.
Put the other guy in jail.
Right. That's so funny. I just got here. Anyway, sorry. You shouldn't have agreed to take this job.
The guy in jail.
Yeah. They say step into his shoes. His shoes are in jail. All right. Well, that would be great. Anyway, I hope that happens. The last time Congress did that was in 1935. That didn't happen then, by the way, just in case you were wondering. Recognizing in 1974 the impracticability of arresting Nixon, too bad, the staff report offered a second option, seeking a court order to enforce compliance. However, the co-equal nature of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches raised a constitutional problem with seeking relief in court, suggesting, quote, it may be thought inappropriate to seek the aid of the judicial branch in exercising these powers, unquote. In other words, three co-equal branches standing there looking at one another, the judicial branch saying, I don't know whether the legislative can force co-equal executive to do this thing, and I don't know if we, being co-equal, can force them either. So I don't know what happens. If we're all seriously co-equal in our powers, and we are all immovable objects and irresistible forces, we all just stand there looking at each other, and nothing happens, and that's as good as letting the executive win, and that can't happen. So I don't know. So they say. They move on to the third. The staff added, seeking either criminal or civil relief for presidential noncompliance would, quote, pose a number of problems for this inquiry, including delay, the uncertainty of relying upon the executive branch to prosecute the chief executive, and doubt whether an incumbent president may be prosecuted for a criminal offense before his impeachment and removal from office, unquote. This would certainly be applicable today, as any effort to compel compliance could well be tied up in court beyond the 2020 elections. The staff finally noted that noncompliance itself might be evidence in an impeachment proceeding. And that's exactly what you've been talking about and what people have been mentioning in the last day or two about Article 3 of the impeachment articles. Still, on April 30th, 1974, Nixon attempted to blunt the impact of his intransigence toward both the committee and the second special prosecutor by making a televised address to the nation in which he displayed stacks of binders containing, maybe, edited transcripts of 33 White House tapes to be delivered to the Judiciary Committee. The committee then wrote Nixon on May 1st that he had not complied with its subpoena, but, in keeping with the committee's report on the difficulties of forcing compliance, a motion that day to recommend to the House that Nixon be found in contempt was defeated 32-5. So they actually voted not to hold him in contempt right there, because by that time they had decided it was useless. In opposing,
there's a quote from Rodino there.
In opposing the motion to recommend holding Nixon in contempt, then Judiciary Committee Chairman Peter Rodino said, "We can consider the non-compliance of the president when we are considering the question of possible grounds of impeachment." And that's, we were talking about that yesterday and just saying, if you don't think contempt, either inherent or statutory, will work, you can simply say, well, that'll just become an article of impeachment. We'll deal with it there and then. And I guess that's ultimately why people think courts might be willing to enforce a subpoena. We just said that they could be standing there all looking at one another and saying, we're all co-equal here. There's nothing we can do. I mean, that could certainly come up again in enforcing a subpoena in a impeachment context. That the president would almost certainly argue, you just said that we can't force one another to do these things. And I guess
except in an impeachment inquiry.
And I guess the answer to why in an impeachment inquiry would that be permissible all of a sudden? You change the name of your hearing and now you can enforce it. And I guess the answer is, this is an inquiry to determine whether or not you're actually the president. Are you the occupant of a co-equal branch or not? You might not be. And if there's any doubt as to whether or not you legitimately hold the office and powers of the president, you can't be co-equal. But, then of course you'd have Clarence Thomas saying, well, until you remove him, he is co-equal. So, I get to get all the information to make that decision about whether to remove. Well, that would be the logical argument, and the ultimate answer to that, even if the court were to say, well, we're not going to let you have the information until you remove him. Then you say, all right, well, that's where Jerry Ford was right. Impeachment is what the House says it is. You're now on trial for your presidency, and we're just going to impeach you. You're just straight up impeached for not giving us the information. At which point, of course, maybe the Republican Senate says, well, we don't care. But if they don't care, I don't understand. If Republican senators say we don't care, why would Democratic House members say, you know what, Republicans who we oppose are right, senators who we typically oppose as well are right? Well, as a House Democrat, I'm going to just say it's all the same, and I'm a Senate Republican now. It doesn't matter.
The House has various bills that they know the Senate says no way, no how.
Yeah, they do
Why are
that
they
all the
passing
time.
this?
I don't know. They do it as messaging, and this message they don't want to carry
it's
for whatever
messaging.
reason.
Not having an impeachment inquiry of Trump is messaging.
Yes.
That's sort of my point here.
Right. No, I'm in agreement with you there. But yeah, so as far as why an impeachment context would make a difference as between the fight between three immovable objects is we're no longer sure whether this person is the object we were describing.
No, but I think the courts have recognized that an impeachment inquiry gives the legislature the trump card over the executive. That's what happened.
I guess so.
They've all said it. In the executive branch itself, in the DOJ and in its OLC opinions, has said this.
Yeah, and I mean it's basic civics at some level. I mean it's at some point it's high-minded gray area of constitutional law, but it's explicable with basic civics. The reason it works in this context, even if you don't buy into the notion, and there would be a good counter argument. Well, you have to remove them if you want that evidence.
Get that,
would be
David, but
yeah.
But when you're talking about the process of removing him, you give the Congress its highest powers. It's at its zenith is the idea.
Yeah, I know that they say that, and I agree. And all I'm saying is I think the reason that you have to give Congress a power boost in this three-way contest at that point is, well, it is also explicitly a explicitly delineated check on the presidency. Impeachment is meant to be able to put the brakes on the presidency and remove the president from office. This is the whole point of this section of the Constitution. It's the founders' vision of how to settle the three-way standoff. Exactly. This is an explicit power of the Congress. We gave them this power for this purpose. And, I mean, while I guess 5 justices could sit there and say, nah, it would be extraordinary. I mean, they've done extraordinary things before, but that's, if you're wondering where does it come from, this idea that the powers are at their zenith when in an impeachment inquiry. It's because they've declared, we've basically dropped the bomb on this one. We're doing that one thing which we're allowed by the Constitution explicitly to do, to just completely undo the executive.
If you can't indict a president for criminal acts, and the remedy is impeachment, then the Congress's power over the president in an impeachment proceeding must be paramount.
Yeah, otherwise, it has to get settled somehow.
He is above the law. Yeah.
That's basically it. It's the only way that the scheme actually works. So, and that's certainly judicial canon. The only way you interpret, just as you would with a statute.
It's reaffirmed by the D.C. Circuit, as I said, the jurisdiction where everybody sits, that impeachment investigations are different. Rule 6E gives way to an impeachment proceeding.
I guess that is now the rule.
Executive privilege gives way in an impeachment proceeding.
Because it's designed to undo the executive. You're invoking this? All right. I guess that has to be it.
The arguments for investigation that say, but not impeachment, inquiry, are just empty and disingenuous. Because if you're for using the investigatory powers, and not impeaching even, You have to be for an impeachment inquiry because otherwise there will be no investigation.
I guess that is true. That is the power that ultimately underlies basic, regular investigative power as well. The reason you need to comply with ordinary oversight requests is that refusal to do so without basis, without legal basis, is an impeachable offense. It has to be, otherwise there's no oversight power. Just as in a smaller scale, the Senate hold, when we used to have to deal with those things. Why can one senator put something on hold that doesn't make any sense constitutionally or democratically? 1 out of 100 can just say hold. And the answer is it doesn't have any power in itself. It's just a stand-in for the filibuster. They could by themselves prevent you for a long time from moving forward. They're just warning you, rather than have to stand here and listen to me, just know that I could do this. Same thing with, oversight. Here's your subpoena. Well, I don't care what you have. A piece of paper? I'm not going. I don't want to be there. Well, ultimately what stands behind this piece of paper is we can just say you don't have that power anymore. We can just remove it. But I thought we were co-equal. Yes, but we are. But then you remember your basic civics. There's checks and balances. There are things you can do too. You veto our legislation. You run the departments. You are the chief law enforcement officer. There's lots of places you can stymie us. There's only a few we can stymie you, and this is one of them.
You're right. If you read out this power from the Congress, then the president is above the law, period. Now, of course, I'm talking about in terms of the structure, the reality of what is and isn't true. The de facto versus the de jure is two different things. But de jure, the courts and the executive branch have historically and in writing, in cases, in OLC opinions, said an impeachment inquiry supercharges the congressional investigatory power, and we don't get to claim Rule 6C, and we don't get to claim executive privilege, and we don't get to claim basically anything. We don't get to say it's not a legitimate legislative purpose because, of course, it is. It's right in the Constitution.
Yeah.
So that's why that framework. Look,
okay.
Legal stuff is a bunch of BS. But you have to go through
at some level.
BS.
Yeah.
If you really want to do it. If you don't want to do it, then just admit it and just shut up about it. And Richard Neal, stop sending letters. And Nancy Pelosi, stop telling me how you're going to hold him to account. Go back to he's not worth it and just, okay, well, then for the next 18 months, he's going to break the law and do whatever the hell he wants and line his pockets with foreign money. And then we'll say, well, but then we'll vote him out. So the only remedy is voting him out. And then he goes home and he's become a billionaire by stealing everything. And then what? You're going to indict him then or something? Is that the theory? Okay, whatever. But don't pretend to me anymore that you're for investigations, because it means you're just not telling the truth. You're lying to us.
I guess so. Like many things and in many situations, that usually they are hoping that people don't see this or come to understand it in any way. And when they call the offices to complain, that the staff won't know how to talk about it.
I'd like to know the theory of who is going to reward Democrats for being timid. It's not the Republican voter, clearly. The Democratic voter, I think, is going to be upset.
Yeah.
And not
the
reward.
Great swing
So
voter.
we're talking about this mythical swing voter who says, oh, well, now I really like the Democrats because they didn't do this.
Yeah.
Is there a single voter who thinks that way?
There's always somebody, I guess, but yeah, I don't know who's going to be really pleased with the idea that he's probably committed a bunch of crimes. I keep telling the pollsters that, but apparently the polls we all keep saying, oh yeah, we think he's committed crimes. We think he's committed crimes in office, but don't do anything about it. apparently that's
again.
enormously
I've never
popular.
been a fan of issue polling. I think
True. You have said that.
it doesn't really reflect, and of course, there's nothing that's more malleable than issue polling. Can I convince you that you should be in favor of removing him from office? Because part of the investigation is that theoretically it's for the Congress itself to make up its own mind.
Yeah.
But it's a political body, and really what it is, for the most part, is to convince the electorate that what you're suggesting is the right thing to do. Why do you have hearings on anything in particular? Because you're going to pass legislation on child separation, for example. Is there some piece of legislation that's going to come up from that?
I don't know. I don't know what the purpose would be in their current context, but
right,
you could
because
try.
nothing's going to pass. Suppose the Democrats in the House come up with a change to the immigration law, and they pass it. What's the Senate going to do?
Not pass it.
Not. So there's as much reason to have that hearing as there is to have any hearing.
I guess.
Because the Democratic House will get not one piece of legislation. Of course, they did the crime reform thing, I guess. So there's one. All right, so they did one.
Yeah,
but nothing else.
Jared Kushner, in your face, he says. Occasionally these things happen. They may have had in mind that they were really going to pass an infrastructure bill last week.
Well, let's say I'm not going to hold it against them for pursuing an infrastructure bill. I'm skeptical that it means much. I don't think I would have done a photo op with Trump so he could say, look at me working with them. I would have just said, listen, here's my legislation. Have your team look at it and see what you think, instead of playing his politics. So I disagree with what was done there in terms of the process, the optics process. But all right, if he wants to do a legislation on that, great. But let's not give him a political win on it.
Yeah.
In terms of the picture and everything else, let's say this is my legislation. You got a counter proposal? Let's look at it. I mean, at some point that's going to happen with either a budget or a continuing spending resolution, whatever ends up happening by October. I don't know when the next shutdown would be, but that's, to me, the one area where they do still have to do deals, and of course they had a shutdown at the beginning, and maybe they'll have another one, and then they have to come up with something, and then that something is agreed to. But there's nothing else that anybody's going to agree to. There's not going to be a new voting rights bill. There's not going to be a election security bill. There's not going to be an anything bill that's meaningful to Democrats.
Not likely. No.
So it's all about optics anyway. We're showing people what we stand for, right? We're for this. And we're against this. We're against the criminal in the White House. Think of it as part of the campaign, if you like.
I don't know why they don't, and I don't know why people keep coming back to it. Well, you have to be for. You can't just be against Trump. How about pro constitutional democracy? I think that's popular. People like that. But
you don't have to. You have to be for something more than being against Trump, but you at least have to be against him,
you should be, right? Well, people do want that.
You got to be against what he's doing, right? I mean, do you think? Here's it this simple. Do you think what he did, as described in the Mueller report, is a serious threat? Do you think his failure to answer subpoenas is a serious threat? Is it a normal give and take situation between the Congress and then, we'll settle this at the ballot box type thing? I'm for higher taxes and you're for lower taxes, and whatever, one of those types of issues? Or is it something bigger? Everyone says it's something bigger, but I won't do anything about it in a bigger way.
Yeah.
So it's okay. It's just politics. I get that. But you have to show people why you think it's something bigger, or they're going to think it's not something bigger. And then, okay, well, that's just one other thing they're fighting about.
Yes. Well, that's
Obstruction
the
of justice
impression
is
they
just
have
another
now.
political issue.
And that's the impression. Yeah, that's the impression they'll come away with, unless there's a lot of work to do to make it look like it's a bigger deal, I guess. Well, at least Lloyd Doggett and others are.
There's paths. There's paths, and maybe I'll take a few minutes after. We'll talk about the paths.
All right. Well, good. Yeah, we can finish up
That
this
can see.
piece and move on from there to the rest of the garbage.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com.
Mitch McConnell calls for an end to investigations of Trump, saying case closed.
Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We'll continue on with this subject, as difficult as it is. Just musing over Pelosi's having to deal with all this. But you say, I did see this flyby on Twitter a while ago. Mitch McConnell says it's all over, right? So he says what?
End to investigations of Trump, case closed.
Yeah, the report is the report, and that's the end of it. And there should be no more formal inquiry about it, which should, of course, tell Democrats we should do this.
I agree with that, but I just think it's funny. Okay, so you run the Senate,
Mm-hmm.
Mr. McConnell. Close all your investigations. We're done with you anyway. We weren't really looking at you to do anything.
Yeah.
So who is he telling? The Speaker of the House how to run her house?
Yeah. Yes, he would,
I mean,
would do that. Sure.
And I think it's kind of a weird speech, and I don't know why it's even being covered. It's absurd. I mean,
Yeah,
what do I care what
storyline.
Mitch McConnell thinks should be done?
Yeah, it's just a contrarian storyline. Case closed, no more investigations. Wow, that's not something that most people think. Well, but he's an important guy. He said it. Let's report it.
Well, he's not important for that because I never expected him. He never opened a case.
Right.
much
No,
less
that's true.
One,
He's not interested.
one to close. What is he talking about?
The Senate Intelligence Committee had something. So now we're done, he says.
Yeah, well, the guy who ran the Senate Intelligence Committee was leaking information to the White House.
And he ought to be investigated
He ought
as
to-
well.
he was obstructing justice himself.
Yeah, we all
Let's
thought
be
it was
honest.
Devin Nunes was the only one, and he was just as
exactly.
bad.
They're teasing a pod.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I don't know if you want to finish the last two
Yeah,
paragraphs.
we'll take a look at this. We had left off and spun off from reading when we read Peter Rodino's quote, right? We can consider the noncompliance of the president when we are considering the question of possible grounds of impeachment. The chairman's words were prophetic. He continues, as an independent ground for impeachment, Article 3 held that Nixon should be impeached for refusing to produce tapes and records and thereby interfering with congressional exercise of its power of impeachment mandated by the Constitution. That article was approved by a vote of 21 to 17 in July. In its final report to the House in 1974, the committee explained why a president should be impeached for defying its subpoenas. And here's the quote. Unless the defiance of the committee's subpoenas under these circumstances is considered grounds for impeachment, it is difficult to conceive of any president acknowledging that he is obligated to supply the relevant evidence necessary for Congress to exercise its constitutional responsibility in an impeachment proceeding. In other words, there would never be impeachment again because presidents would just deny committees the evidence that they needed, and there would be no impeachment power. In 2019, the committee's warning about what a future president may do has come to pass. Congress must act decisively to preserve its constitutional authority. So the 1974 committee that said unless you say it's grounds for impeachment, a future president will just say, go screw yourself. And now in 2019, the president says, go screw yourself. And everybody looks to 1974 and says, well, we went through this once to preserve this power for the future.
Right.
Now, what are we going to do?
But there's also, what's not added here is that, in fact, the House did get the material it subpoenaed because of Nixon versus the United States.
Yeah.
Or rather, the United States v. Nixon. Nixon, United States is the other case where
yes, right.
he said
Walter.
he owned his papers.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
So it's U.S. v.
Right.
Nixon.
I see.
And they said the tapes have to be handed over.
Yeah.
And they were handed over. And they were played in the House Judiciary Committee.
Yeah.
Because of impeachment.
Yeah.
Because it was Rule 6E material.
No. Oh, yeah, that's true, I guess, right?
Of course it was.
And then in addition, even still, he erased part of them.
Well, of course, there was the fumbling of him personally erasing the tape, which is still an amazing story. Look, there will be no investigation. There will be no oversight. So here's where, if we stay where we are. So what is a possible thing that Pelosi's thinking that she hasn't told us? We're going to get Robert Mueller up here.
Yeah.
And we're going to make him read every word of the Mueller report, all 448 pages.
Yes, maybe.
How he does that in one day, I don't know. I think it's, frankly, they should be scheduling 3 days of hearings with Mueller.
Yeah.
And the news media and the television audience will be glued and hear all the terrible things Trump has done. And everyone's going to say, well, it's time to open an impeachment inquiry. And maybe that's her plan. To say, I really didn't want to do it, but after everybody heard Robert Mueller, I've left no choice. And we're opening an impeachment inquiry. Maybe that's her plan. Maybe that's her plan, because otherwise, what is her plan?
Yeah, we don't know. You could theorize all day long that, as we did like during the break, it may just be this is one of those moments where she says, this is the part of the job that sucks. I know we need an impeachment inquiry, but my best information and my best guess on the strategy is that the right time is, during the months of, during the Sagittarius passage. I don't know what.
Maybe she wants to recreate Watergate hearings of the summer of '73.
Right.
And
I don't know.
She's waiting for July to come around.
That could be it. I don't know why that would be, but you never know. But the point is that she could have a very serious intention of saying, I am going to do this. It's just we've decided together that the time to put the formal impeachment label out there is this particular month of this particular year for maximum effect. I don't know what the calculus is, but the time between now and then, I just have to sit there and let people say, you're a coward. You're not doing anything. What's wrong with you? And that's the job. I sit there and take that heat until the right time. And that could be. Of course, it looks exactly the same as I'm an idiot and I'm never going to do anything. So, I don't know what to tell you. All you have to do, what it means for you is if you believe that we should be doing this, if she has no plan at all to do it and is going to resist with every fiber of her being, your job is clear. Push back and protest.
Well,
if it is her plan to do it in July or whenever else. Yeah.
That's what I'm doing in my meager way. And we've made a little bit of headway. We've convinced Professor Tribe. We've convinced a lot of people that an impeachment inquiry is the only legitimate path to investigation, taking on the foundational position that everybody, Glenn Pelosi says, that we need to investigate. Okay, let's say that's all we want to do. We're not really thinking about anything else. Well, the only way you're really going to be able to investigate is by opening an impeachment inquiry. I think Nadler probably is there. He's just actually turned his stagecraft a little bit. Now, Robert Mueller, I believe, is supposed to testify before him. They were asking for May 15th, which would be a week and a day from today. If that date holds, I don't know how they get all his testimony in one day, personally. I think that's kind of misguided. I would have told Mueller to separate 3 days for testimony.
Is he busy otherwise? I don't know.
Honestly, what?
Are you busy with something else?
Right. Well, he's still a Justice Department employee, so he shouldn't be.
Okay. Oh, you shouldn't be? What else? So he's just sitting there?
I mean, Barr said he's done, so he's just sitting in his office, like shooting rubber bands at stuff.
That's a great picture. Tapping with a pencil,
Exactly. He's just sitting around. Hey, nothing in the inbox.
Waiting for this tearing page-a-day calendars off. 14. You watching the clock. 15. Woo! All right, I'm going to the hill.
Done. He has no staff. They're all gone. I don't even know if he has a secretary. He's just sitting in the office there.
Right. I guess. Did somebody throw out my lunch? In the refrigerator. Exactly. I can't believe it. I brought a sandwich.
Can I get a lunch menu?
It's not here. Someone is taking lunches out of the fridge. This is really wrong. All right, hold on. Well, so I don't know what he's doing until then. So, okay, they like you said, they might be stage crafting it, and they have to spend the time. This is what we need to do in order to burn time until the optimal moment arrives. But again, your job is the same regardless of whether she has a plan or not. So luckily, we can't figure it out. That's frustrating. But luckily, the answer is do the same thing that you were going to do.
Exactly. If that is her plan, we're helping her plan by making it seem like she's reluctant.
Yes, right.
Et cetera, and she's
That's
resisting
the best
us. And
possible
then it was only Mueller's testimony, live testimony across the nation, that convinced her that the public understands and it's time to take the next step.
Right. If that could certainly be
the plan,
right, we all think
can help her plan.
Yeah. We all think
by yelling at her till then.
FDR was the big genius. Yes, I agree with you. Now make me do it. And if she's executing the same play, all right, make me do it. Well, all right. This is frustrating. I wish you would just have done it, but if that's the plan, then she does it. What am I going to do? Say, no, I don't accept the impeachment inquiry now because you should have done it the week before. And I hate it.
I'm not going to obviously complain about it finally starting. But the problem that I thought with the framing was she was too negative about impeachment. She very much made a point of saying, I oppose impeachment. Let me make news. The quote was, let me make news. I oppose impeachment.
Yeah, that does make it difficult to believe in a grand plan that eventually results in her saying, well, of course I don't oppose impeachment. That was my plan was to make you think I did until July.
Nadler had much better formulation. He said, let's find out what we have, and then we can decide. Of course, the problem with that little plan was Trump said, well, you're not going to find out anything.
Right. Here, let's see what we have. You have nothing. Ah.
So I guess there's no impeachment. There. Done.
Right.
Or
okay.
as Mitch McConnell says, case closed.
Yes. Right. You've got nothing. I mean, that's two ways of viewing it. Jerry Nadler says, well, I do have nothing. But the reason I have nothing is this impeachable obstruction that's happening. Yeah. And whereas McConnell says, no, the inquiry ends at you have nothing. Obviously.
that's where,
because
that is where we are going to be. Mueller's going to, basically do an oral reading of his report, presumably. Yeah. I think your idea of a little claymation would be pretty fun. maybe Andrew Yang can come in and do some PowerPoints or something. And the idea, though, is, look, there's a CNN poll from last week. 75% of Americans don't know what's in the Mueller report. 8% say they read it. I don't believe it. It's probably 1%. 12% say they've heard about it on the news. And 3% said they've heard it from friends or something. 75% of the population does not know what's in the Mueller report.
Yeah.
How do you, as the Speaker of the House, figure out how to convey what's in the Mueller report to the American people? You have hearings.
Right.
You have claymation hearings, and you have the witnesses. Like, my idea was to have everybody that's cited for testimony in the Mueller report, have them come up and recreate what they supposedly did. My first one is Don McGahn, of course, who will say, yes, the president told me to fire Mueller. Yes, the president told me to do these other 17 bad things.
Yeah.
That's how you do it, right? You actually just do a dramatization of the Mueller report. And how do you do it in Congress? You do it through hearings.
People would watch it. Yeah, I guess that's the only vehicle they really have to do it, unless you could dress up the cast of Game of Thrones to do it.
Exactly. It would be funny if instead of the coffee cups they'd have had, Daenerys had a big stack of the Mueller report in front of her.
That's right. She's reading it. Like, this is outrageous. Have you seen this?
This is outrageous. Impeach Cersei.
Right. Now you have something. It's people like entertainment. I don't know. There's other series you could borrow from. We also have 20,000 presidential candidates. They could each take a section. That's be the first debate. They all just read 20 pages, one after the other.
Right.
Big Democratic unity
I
event.
I actually think that some of the candidates have missed an opportunity, particularly the lesser-known ones. They should have been running on "We need to impeach." I know Elizabeth Warren did, and that certainly helped her, and she's a major candidate. But if I'm a minor candidate,
I'd be recording my reading of the Mueller report and say a free audio book of the Mueller report read by Andrew Yang.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, free with a, of course they would say free with a $25 donation, which would be the smart thing to do.
Or what have you. The reality, though, is at this point, I think it's all coming down to whether Mueller is compelling or not, whether there's going to be anything that happens. It appears that Mueller is going to appear, though, of course, as you know, Trump tweeted that he shouldn't appear.
Right.
Democrats shouldn't get a second bite at the apple.
You're right.
Which I don't even know what a second bite of the apple is supposed to mean, but
there was no first bite. Right.
But Barr supposedly, according to news reports, still is firm that Mueller should testify. Yeah, well, we'll see about that. Barr's ability to defy Trump is not something to be expected. But off we go.
All right.
Anyway, that's it. My spleen is vented.
Okay.
You have 13 minutes to tell funny stories.
Yes, well, there are other stories, none of which are particularly funny, but I do. We also should note, of course, for the record, the growing number of former federal prosecutors signing on to the letter that basically argues that 500 now. But for Trump allegedly being the president of the United States, we have to be careful with these things, he would have been charged with obstruction of justice by my reading of what's here, which is, of course, what their job was.
What I found interesting about the argument is they actually put it in the context of public corruption. That is, they really looked at it through the prism of other elected officials who they say took similar actions, governors and mayors and things like that, right?
Yeah.
And they said, we've indicted governors who did this stuff. We've indicted mayors who did this stuff. We've indicted congressmen who've done this stuff.
Yeah.
The only reason you weren't indicted is because there is this Justice Department policy that says we can't indict a sitting president.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think that actually makes sense. I would say you can indict him, but you can't try him unless he waives his immunity and says, "I want to stand trial and prove my innocence," type of thing. But
that's not.
Yeah, I thought it was actually pretty powerful, not only because of the numbers, but because of the context of them saying, "Listen, we're not even talking about a man on the street. We're talking about governors. We're talking about senators. We're talking about people like that who have betrayed the public trust and used their official powers to obstruct justice."
Yes. Right. So, we've been there before. The next best analogy, if you accept the DOJ policy on the president, what other high-ranking officials, what happens to them? Because everyone knows that they're typically reluctant to indict those guys. Yeah, of those of us who have done it. I
actually find, the hypocrisy, and it's always, hypocrisy is the coin of the realm in Washington. But, you remember one of the articles of impeachment against Bill Clinton was obstruction of justice.
Yes.
What was the obstruction of justice that he tried to get? One of them was that he tried to get Betty Curry to provide false testimony. And the reality of it was there was no actual direct evidence of it other than this is, there was arguably coaching type of discussion, but Curry apparently it failed because she told the truth supposedly. But you have Donald Trump, there's direct testimony from the people he said, and you, Don McGahn, you go out there and lie about what I said.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't be more direct. And how can a guy like Ken Starr and Lindsey Graham, who says the famous line, like Graham said, well, it's not like he's going to say, I am telling you to lie about this. That's not how it works, he says. You sort of talk around it. You do this or you do that. But that Trump didn't talk around it.
No.
He flat out told her to go out there and lie. But Lindsey Graham's going to pretend, and this guy's going to say case closed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah.
Yes. But that's every day these days, right?
Yeah.
Every day is absurd.
Pretty much.
Christopher Wray has been testifying all day, and apparently he says there was no illegal spying going on contra Bill Barr.
Oh, well, they ought to get together.
Yeah.
The two of them. Yeah, I don't know. All right, well, we'll continue to monitor that, and tomorrow will be Wednesday, and Wednesday is the scheduled vote on whether to, I guess what? Are they finally going to have a contempt
Fight him
vote?
in contempt.
Yeah.
Okay. Bill Barr will be in contempt, and then what? I refer this contempt proceeding against Bill Barr to you. Bill Barr. Go prosecute yourself.
Right. Okay, right. That's the new Cheneyism, right? Go prosecute yourself. And he'll say, tell you what.
That is the process, right?
Yeah.
Unless they put him in the jail in the basement.
Right, which doesn't exist.
Yes.
By the way, the answer to that is, it's not there, but that doesn't mean there's no jail that you could put him in. You put him in the D Street holding facility that the Capitol Police made. If you protest at the Capitol and get yourself arrested,
cages that you were talking about.
That would be funny.
That's my jail. We have a cage with documents. That's your jail.
Right.
When you have to go out to the bathroom, here's a bucket.
Yeah, put him on the 5th floor of the Cannon Building, and in the storage cages. You could do that, but
put him in a storage cage.
The real answer, in case anybody wants to know where to find Bill Barr if he were held in inherent contempt, I don't know if they would make an exception, but ordinarily, Capitol Police arrest you, say because you're there to protest. They put you in a holding cell if it's just a couple of you, in a facility they maintain near the Senate side office buildings on D Street Northwest, or is it Northeast?
Right. That's where we'll find Bill Barr, right?
Yeah, unless of course they say, well, I don't know, we have to put him in something else.
Yeah. they put him
drunk
at?
tank won't work.
I assume they're going to get him a room at the Trump Hotel.
Yeah, right. Maybe they could put
House
him in
arrest.
Jeffrey Epstein's suite in the Palm Beach County lockup.
Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, as a
don't
prisoner there. Put an ankle bracelet on him and hope that the Saudis don't fly him out of the country.
That's right.
All right.
Jesus. Oh boy! All right, my friend. Thank you
Take
for
care.
letting me rant, and
Certainly.
I'll be listening tomorrow.
Okay, very good. And we'll be back on the subject tomorrow, I am sure. I guess by way of closing things out, just to give you like another article to read later on so that you actually know about something else that's going on. This one comes to our attention thanks to Carolyn Fiddler, who brought us this fun bit of news. Or at least commentary on this fun bit of news, being reported by the Virginia papers, the Virginian Pilot. Former U.S. Representative Scott Taylor campaign staffer indicted in petition forgery scandal. Oh my gosh, what do you know? Another issue of, I guess, swirling around voting and election fraud perpetrated by the people who insist that there is widespread fraud going on perpetrated by Democrats, that is to say, by Republicans. Actually doing this thing. A campaign staffer for ex-Congressman Scott Taylor was charged Monday with submitting forged petition signatures as part of a scheme to siphon votes from his Democratic opponent. Follow the scheme here. A grand jury indicted Lauren Creekmore Peabody on 2 counts of election fraud. Election fraud. How scary. Circuit Court Clerk Tina Sinan said the crime is a felony punishable by 1 to 10 years in prison and a $2,500 fine. They should probably up that a little bit. An arrest warrant for Peabody, I don't know if it's Peabody or Peabody, was issued afterward, Sinan said, but she didn't know if it had been served. Again, you're under arrest, but we may or may not come after you. I don't know. Peabody is one of several Taylor campaign staff members who circulated petitions to help get an independent congressional candidate, Sean Brown, on the ballot. State Democrats believe that Taylor, a Republican, was hoping to lure votes from Luria by getting Brown included in the highly competitive race. Roanoke Commonwealth's attorney Donald Caldwell was asked to look into the forgery allegations after they surfaced. And there's an extensive report here, but I also want to point out to you what Carolyn had to say about this. She was saying, yes, this is bad, but what I want to know, in a series of tweets, what I want to know is, get this, the sheriff who used to be a member of the state Senate and who has one brother who's a Commonwealth's attorney and another who's a sitting member of the House, actively participated in this election fraud, and how is that not a bigger deal? That is a good question. She includes this screen grab from the Virginian Pilot piece. The Pilot also determined it was Virginia Beach Sheriff's staff who circulated petition pages among dozens of jail employees rather than the Taylor workers who signed off on them, which is a violation of state law. Yes, it is. Caldwell was asked to investigate the allegations after Virginia Beach Commonwealth's attorney Colin Stoll, that's his name, his actual name, S-T-O-L-L-E, spelled like Trump would if he were being asked to spell the word Stoll. But Colin Stoll recused himself. Stoll's brother, Virginia Beach Sheriff Ken Stoll, had signed one of the petitions and allowed them to be circulated among his staff. Caldwell then asked Virginia State Police to help with the investigation. So that's something else. And Carolyn also adding, of course, here, remind me to change my last name to Stoll before doing crimes. Yeah, pretty amazing. And, well, you know, you think all the sleaziest things are happening in and around Trump's inner circle, but you forget there's a lot of other people make a habit of doing crimes too. Well, it's a rough world out there. And I have to remind you, as always, do not despair. Stay positive the best you can. Like I said, we're just speculating as to whether or not Nancy Pelosi has grander plans. It doesn't mean she should have been replaced in the beginning, because we wouldn't have come out the way we did through the shutdown had an inexperienced candidate, particularly one of the more conservative candidates, taken the gavel. I don't know necessarily, and haven't given a great deal of thought to what would have happened had a new and more progressive person taken the gavel, but I don't think we had the votes to get that job done. Anyway, we'll be back tomorrow, it being Wednesday, with both Greg Dworkin and we hope Joan McCarter, who will help us anticipate the votes in the Judiciary Committee, figure out what's going on, digest the articles that are still coming out a mile a minute about whether or not we ought to be talking about impeachment or not, and diffuse most of that negative thinking, I hope, and we'll have their perspective on those things for you tomorrow. For now, you stay tuned, why don't you? I insist that you do. We'll force you to do so through the courts. For the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam, as always, a fantastic selection, a cross-section of all the things in all the news sections.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
I'm going to jump right down to the end where he has all the juiciest, interesting esoterica. Let's see. 2 Reuters reporters walked free from a prison in Myanmar after being held for 500 days for doing their job. And at least 8 people are dead as cops raid a Rio slum amid sharp rise in killings by police.